In April 1945, President Franklin D. Roosevelt died in office, and his vice president, Harry S. Truman, took the oath of office. Truman continued with the mission of winning World War II and handling the alliance fighting in Europe, Asia, and the Pacific. But, unlike his predecessor, he saw a different and equally dangerous world coming when that conflict was over. Unlike FDR, Truman was not enamored with the communist world, and his presidency would establish that fact. Who was Harry S. Truman? What made him effective but also controversial as a president? What situations did he handle well and which ones did he not? What were considered his failures? What were considered his successes? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former history professor, Army and Marine Corps veteran, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History. Harry S. Truman was born on May 8, 1884, in Lamar, Missouri. Truman was known for wanting to have things his way, but he also listened to advice from those he trusted, but he could be ruthless against those he did not. Truman briefly attended Spalding's Commercial College after high school, but discontinued. He was the only president since William McKinley to have never earned a college degree. Truman could not afford college, so he applied to West Point, but his eyesight prevented acceptance. He joined the Missouri National Guard in 1905 and served until 1911 in the Kansas City-based Battery B, 2nd Missouri Field Artillery, reaching the rank of corporal. As the U.S. entered World War I, Truman was sent for training to Camp Donovan, Fort Sill near Lawton, Oklahoma, when his regiment was federalized as the 129th Field Artillery. Due to his aptitude, he was appointed as a first lieutenant, and Truman was promoted to captain effective April 23rd as his unit shipped out for France, and in July, he became commander of Battery D, 129th Field Artillery, 35th Division. When in combat, Truman ignored his standing orders to not fire on targets unless ordered to do so, and was limited in his field of fire. But when he saw a German artillery unit, he saw it as an opportunity and had his battery fire, destroying the German guns, attacking the 28th Division. Upon returning home, he opened a haberdashery in Kansas City, Missouri. He was elected as a judge of Jackson County in 1922 despite not being a lawyer, but he did have a successful business venture. Truman was then elected to the United States Senate from Missouri in 1934. As a senator, Truman opposed both Nazi Germany and Communist Russia, but empathized with the Western Europeans under German occupation. 2 days after Hitler invaded the Soviet Union, on June 22, 1941, Truman said, "If we see that Germany is winning, we ought to help Russia, and if Russia is winning, we ought to help Germany. And that way, let them kill as many as possible, although I don't want to see Hitler victorious under any circumstances." Between 1940 and 1944, he gained national prominence as chairman of the Truman Committee, which was aimed at reducing waste and inefficiency in wartime contracts, which FDR, who was not a real fan of Truman, saw as a critical effort. FDR chose Truman to run as his VP in his last election as he was considered an acceptable moderate. It was only after FDR's death and Truman assumed the presidency that he was even informed about the ongoing Manhattan Project and the atomic bomb by General Leslie Groves. Truman issued the Potsdam Declaration demanding the unconditional surrender of the Japanese government, warning of prompt and utter destruction. 11 days later, on August 6, 1945, having received no reply, he ordered the first bomb dropped on Hiroshima. 3 days later, with no surrender, he ordered the second bomb dropped on Nagasaki. These two decisions have been considered the most controversial decisions in presidential history. In 1945, Truman asked Congress to raise taxes to create a national healthcare system, which was not well received, and it was killed by Republican Senator Robert Taft Smith Ball Bill which would allow states to make healthcare private. When Republicans regained control of the House in 1946, Truman's healthcare bill died, but it laid the groundwork for future Democrat presidents, culminating in the disastrous Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. Following the refusal of Congress to vote on civil rights legislation led by Truman, he integrated the military on July 26, 1948, and issued Executive Order 9981, which eventually outlawed discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, or national origin in the United States Armed Forces. In effect, Truman had desegregated the military and launched the first major action guaranteeing equal rights. But there would be a long way to go, and Southern Democrats became enraged when he began supporting civil rights for blacks. Led by South Carolina Governor and later U.S. Senator Strom Thurmond, the Southerners broke away and established the States' Rights Party, also known as the Dixiecrat faction. The Democrat Party was forever fractured in two parts: the Southern Democrats, who imposed Jim Crow laws, and Northern Democrats, who were more in line with Republicans on civil rights. Truman, being from Missouri, was considered a traitor. Truman was also attacked by the pro-communist left wing of his party because of his policy towards the Soviets, which they regarded as aggressive and provocative. As a result, Franklin Roosevelt's former vice president, Henry Wallace, and his followers established the Progressive Party. The House Un-American Activities Committee, created in 1938, was to root out communists in the federal government and was accelerated under Truman and led by Wisconsin Senator Joseph McCarthy. During this period, Truman had to intervene where accusations arose regarding communists being in the federal government, even in the CIA, which he created and later disliked but was unable to completely rein in, as Director Alan Walsh Dulles wielded a lot of political power. In March 1947, under pressure from Attorney General Tom Clark, Truman created his loyalty program and signed Executive Order 9835, prescribing procedures for the administration of an employee's loyalty program in the executive branch of the government. This program, being authorized by the Attorney General, basically forced employees to fill out a form, declare their political beliefs, voting record, and establish departmental loyalty boards to conduct loyalty screenings of federal employees and job applicants. It also allowed the FBI to investigate anyone applying under the fear of subversion. This was considered by many to be unconstitutional, violating the Fifth and Ninth Amendments, as it pried into people's privacy. The loyalty program had been criticized as a weapon of hysteria attacking law-abiding citizens and for helping create the Joseph McCarthy witch hunts. The Attorney General's office compiled its list of subversive organizations, and not just communists, but persons known to have prior involvement in protest or labor strikes were investigated by the FBI. As the Cold War intensified, these investigations grew more frequent and far-reaching, such as the illegal COINTELPRO under FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. See our video on him. Also in 1947, President Harry S. Truman pledged that the United States would help any nation resist communism in order to prevent its spread. His policy of containment is known as the Truman Doctrine, and American taxpayers footed the bill, and billions of dollars went overseas to fund corrupt governments and overthrow those democracies deemed too weak to resist communism. The most important countries under threat at that time were Greece, which fought a bloody civil war right after World War II, and Turkey, which bordered the Soviet Union, as well as the newly created nation of South Korea. It was also feared that Italy would follow Yugoslavia, Albania, and Eastern Europe, with special interest in Guatemala and Iran, so Truman authorized operations and massive expenditures in those countries. Truman was, however, the first world leader to officially recognize Israel as a legitimate Jewish state, much to the chagrin of many in Washington on May 14, 1948. Truman reminded his detractors that he did not have any Arabs voting for him in the Democratic Party. This was also a period which saw him take the lead in creating the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and having it ratified by the Senate. In June 1948, the Soviet Union, whose territory fully surrounded Berlin, cut off all ground traffic into and out of West Berlin to force the Allies to abandon the city. Truman rightfully then took bold action and ordered the Berlin airlift, which Curtis LeMay executed. By 1949, the United States was locked in fierce competition with the Soviet Union for influence in the world. This was considered to be the greatest threat to the post-war world. Korea and Vietnam, formerly French Indochina, had both been divided between a communist North and a democratic South. Tensions were rising there. Since World War II, the United States had been unable to stop the Soviet Union from dominating Eastern Europe due to the weak-minded policies of FDR. Truman feared that other struggling countries recovering from the war would experience a similar fate. On January 20, 1949, after his re-election, President Harry S. Truman delivered his second inaugural address and introduced his four-point program. This would see a flood of American tax dollars going overseas, along with the Marshall Plan to prevent nations recovering from the war from going into the communist sphere of influence. On October 1, 1949, the People's Republic of China was officially created after the communists won their civil war, and plenty of blame went around. Truman had promised to support the nationalists, but he did not. He was blamed for not actively supporting Chiang Kai-shek against the communists, but Truman did not want to engage in what could be a major Asian war. He believed that he could have brought the Soviets into it. On June 25, 1950, North Korean forces invaded South Korea by crossing over the 38th parallel with the support of the Soviet Union. Truman did not press for a congressional declaration of war. Instead, he classified the Korean conflict as a UN-led police action operating under the authority of the Security Council. Eventually, 53 United Nations allies would send over 19,000 troops to Korea, and over 1.7 million Americans would serve in this conflict. General Douglas MacArthur was appointed as Supreme Allied Commander and was initially quite successful in driving back the North Korean forces over the 38th parallel. He made a controversial move, however, when he continued to push the North Koreans all the way to the Yalu River north, which is the border with China. He then suggested bombing cities in China that were thought to be aiding the North Korean troops. Truman feared China would get involved, and Curtis E. LeMay believed that would happen anyway, and he supported MacArthur. MacArthur did not believe the Chinese would get involved, and if they did, the USSR would not join the war, but that proved to be an error. Truman chose the side of caution, but his passive response did not prevent 300,000 Chinese soldiers joining the fight. Truman was trying to negotiate a ceasefire, but MacArthur made that difficult when he ordered his troops to invade North Korea and push the communists up past the 38th parallel. When they hit the Yalu River, that was when Truman had had enough. Truman also underestimated the support being given by Stalin and the USSR. This was not the first or last time that MacArthur had ignored direct orders from Truman. Truman was incensed when MacArthur reached the Yalu River, and Truman lost his mind. On April 11, 1951, Truman officially relieved Douglas MacArthur of his command, and word spread quickly, upsetting most Americans. Truman felt that MacArthur had overstepped his authority, which in fact he did, although he did have the positive impact of forcing other UN nations to take a more active role in the war. But he did defy his direct orders and interfered with ending the Korean War quickly. There were a few who believed that MacArthur's plan would have worked and kept China at bay, with LeMay being one of them. The real threat was the Soviet Union, as they had the atomic bomb also. Truman also had problems back home. The Office of Price Stabilization had previously enacted price controls on various wartime industries, including steel tonnage pricing, while the Wage Stabilization Board worked to limit wage increases for workers to what they felt was a reasonable amount. With these two agencies being involved, the U.S. was able to keep producing war materials without interruption from labor and industry disputes over prices and wages. However, this was not popular with the workers, and when there was a danger to this authority, Truman acted. Due to the threat of strikes by the steel workers and with the Korean War's requirements, Truman issued Executive Order 10340 to seize control of the steel industries on April 8, 1952. The companies sued the government in a class action, resulting in a Supreme Court decision determining that Truman had overstepped his constitutional powers in the steel seizures. The ruling held that the president had acted unconstitutionally because neither Congress nor the Constitution gave him the authority to seize the steel mills. Truman had many controversies, legally, morally, and ethically. His actions may be deemed as necessary for the times or immoral and illegal and self-serving, depending upon your perspective. Harry S. Truman died on December 26, 1972 in Kansas City, Missouri, and is still considered by many to be one of the best U.S. presidents we've ever had, and some consider him one of the worst, but we will let you decide. Thank you for watching this episode of Forgotten History. If you liked what you saw, please click like, share, and subscribe. And if you would like to assist with the ever-increasing cost of production, please consider becoming a channel member and joining our Patreon page. Please check out our merchandise store. And thanks for watching.